There's really nothing vague about the vagus nerve. In fact, I think it's pretty important. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of You and Me and Multiple Sclerosis. My name is Pam. I've been living with multiple sclerosis for over 39 years. And it's just been dawning on me in recent months that because I've got some issues going on with peristalsis, which is the nerves in your digestive tract, essentially, that move your food along and all that fun stuff. And it turns out me talking to a friend who's got MS and she's also dealing with peristalsis issues. I thought, okay, that's not the central nervous system. In fact, that's not even really the peripheral nervous system. That's what they call the autonomic nervous system, the one that kind of runs on its own. I mean, you can control your breathing to an extent, but if you're asleep, you breathe on your own. Your heart beats on its own. The peristalsis is supposed to happen without you being involved with that at all. There's a lot of stuff that happens with our nervous system that we don't really have much to do with and we don't pay much attention to, but it's essential for life. And I thought, okay, if you can start to have problems with peristalsis, why couldn't you start having problems with other aspects of your autonomic nervous system? And that would really be scary, wouldn't it? So I'm wondering, how do I even go about discovering this? I'm no doctor, but I pay attention to a lot of the things that are being studied. And I thought, well, I should probably take a look and see if there's anything in the literature that would help me understand whether MS affects the autonomic nervous system. And I have to tell you right now, I have not found a lot. If we look at the nerve that is very, very important to life in general, the vagus nerve, we find that there are some interesting interrelationships between MS and the vagus nerve. But before I get into that, maybe you want to know, what is a vagus nerve?
The vagus nerve is an extremely long nerve that travels from the brainstem to the colon and has a long list of functions. It carries sensory information about pain, touch, and temperature from the throat, parts of the inner and outer ear, and the meninges near the back of the head. It plays a very minor role in taste. It also receives sensory information from internal organs in the neck, chest, and abdomen, like the esophagus, heart, and digestive tract. And it carries sensory information from both baroreceptors in the aorta that detect changes in blood pressure and chemoreceptors in the aorta that sense oxygen levels in the blood. The vagus nerve controls the movement of a number of muscles in the pharynx, soft palate, and larynx, as well as one muscle in the tongue, to play a critical role in the control of speaking and swallowing. It is also the main parasympathetic nerve of the body, providing parasympathetic innervation to organs throughout the neck, thorax, and abdomen, contributing to a variety of functions such as the slowing of heart rate.
According to Science Direct, by the way, the parasympathetic nervous system is responsible for the body's rest and digestion response when the body is relaxed, resting, or feeding. It basically undoes the work of sympathetic division after a stressful situation. So I guess the long and the short of it is, the parasympathetic nervous system calms you down.
Symptoms of vagus nerve damage may include hoarseness of the voice, difficulty swallowing, and a deficient gag reflex. The uvula may deviate away from the side where the damage has occurred. Because the nerve supplies a number of organs, however, damage can result in many other symptoms as well, like abnormalities in heart rate or gastrointestinal problems.
Well, I hope that video was helpful in understanding what your vagus nerve is. When I went out to do a Google search on MS and the vagus nerve, I really wasn't finding an awful lot, at least nothing recent. So is there any research going on with this? Because it sure seems like there ought to be. I searched on vagus nerve and MS symptoms. I also searched several other ways, but I kept coming up with pretty much the same stuff. So let me just show you really quickly, not that I'm going to look at any of these in detail, but you notice, okay, so we have something from 2022. Unless you think that that's kind of old, There's one from 2017, and another one from 2022, and another one 2013, 2020, 2023 at least. That's sort of vaguely recent, but it's from Health Rising. It's not really a scientific journal or anything like that. I think in the popular literature you can find an awful lot about the effect of stimulating the vagus nerve on MS symptoms. And if you've had any experience with that, let me know, because it sounds like it could actually be helpful. But I was looking at something a little different, and I'm just kind of not seeing it. So as you can see, we've got 2016, we've got some things that are fairly recent, but they don't seem to really be capturing exactly what I was looking for. 2019 is another one. So to say that it's not been looked at would be incorrect. But to say that it's been looked at from the point of view that I was hoping for would be quite incorrect. All the same, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this study that's just come out. The article just came out anyway on March 19th, 2024 in Multiple Sclerosis News Today, and it's called Neurostimulator to Repair Myelin in Relapsing MS, named Breakthrough Device, and that's pretty interesting. The FDA status supports work on potential treatment trial in patients possible. So we haven't actually tried it out in people yet, it looks like. But what are we saying? We're saying the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, has designated SetPoint Medical's neurostimulator a breakthrough device for the treatment of relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis. This designation is intended to accelerate the development of devices intending to more effectively treat or diagnose life-threatening or chronically debilitating diseases than standard approaches. So getting fast-tracked must mean that they're seeing a lot of promise. Translate that also into dollars for the medical establishment, the pharmaceutical companies, but never mind. It was supported by evidence showing that SetPoint's nerve stimulator platform may slow myelin damage and promote its repair, which is, that's pretty exciting if that's true, an unmet need in multiple sclerosis and other demyelinating conditions. The company now is planning to work with the regulatory agency to open a clinical trial of the therapeutic device in relapsing MS patients. So you're getting cutting-edge news here. Now this is the part I found really quite exciting. The possibility of myelin sheath repair in people with relapsing MS. This significant milestone highlights the platform potential of SetPoint's device and therapeutic approach for the treatment of multiple chronic conditions. Murthy V. Simhambala, PhD, CEO of SetPoint Medical, said in a company press release, and I apologize because I'm sure I butchered that name. And he says that as next steps, we look forward to working collaboratively with the FDA to initiate the first of its kind clinical trial to investigate our device for people living with relapsing MS. MS is caused by an erroneous immune response against components of the myelin sheath, a fatty substance that wraps around nerve fibers to help them transmit nerve signals more efficiently. This results in myelin loss or demyelination and nerve cell damage, ultimately leading to a range of disease symptoms. We are all familiar with those. While over 20 disease-modifying therapies now are approved to treat relapsing MS forms, these mostly work by reducing the inflammatory attacks that drive the disease and have little to no ability to repair myelin. And that, of course, would be the holy grail, remyelination. And the things that have been looked at up to now are things like the BTK inhibitors. And those so far have not really shown the promise they hoped for. So now we're looking at a different thing. As they say, these drugs do not completely stop the development of new lesions, nor do they promote repair, remyelination of existing lesions and damaged tissue. And I'm not going to try and pronounce these names, I'm sorry. I'm just sure I'm not going to get it right. Professor of Theology at Johns Hopkins University. And there's an urgent unmet need for therapies that can promote protection and functional restoration of damaged axons through remyelination in patients, and SetPoint's therapeutic approach could offer new hope to people living with this chronic, debilitating condition, Saita added. And they say device placed near vagus nerve in neck. So see, now finally we're seeing why this article is being highlighted in this particular video. Device placed near vagus nerve in neck to trigger inflammatory reflex pathway. Well, okay, so you know what? I may not be as off base as I thought, in the sense that the vagus nerve controls a lot more than we tend to think. SetPoint's device is believed to address this need by stimulating the vagus nerve, the longest nerve in the body that runs from the brain to multiple organs and controls such functions as digestion, heart rate, and breathing. The vagus nerve also can detect and respond to inflammatory signals, triggering a pathway called the inflammatory reflex that reduces excessive inflammatory signals and restores balance to the immune system. SetPoint reports that its researchers discovered the precise nerve fibers involved in the inflammatory reflex and the specific stimulation parameters needed to activate this pathway. The device is a small nerve stimulator roughly the size of an oral capsule that is designed to be implanted in the next region of the vagus nerve through a small incision done during an outpatient procedure. The implant has a battery that can be recharged with a wireless charger, and its electrical pulses can be adjusted for precision by physicians using an iPad application. A number of proof-of-concept studies have demonstrated the device's safety and effectiveness at reducing immune responses in people with rheumatoid arthritis and inflammatory bowel diseases, SetPoint reports. An ongoing and pivotal phase 3 trial, and there's the number, you can look that up, may support a request for the device's approval to treat adults with rheumatoid arthritis, a disease caused by immune system attacks on joints and other tissues. Okay, well, we're moving in a kind of different direction here from things that we've seen before. It looks like it's pretty low impact with as far as side effects. And I think that might be pretty good. I'm also wondering, too, if just because it's starting with relapsing MS, it might also have some kind of success with the progressive forms of MS, perhaps not total reversal in remyelination, because let's face it, those of us with progressive MS have been on this journey for a long time, and we have a lot of damage. But I'm wondering if there's any hope that this might help with smoldering MS. I think it's too early for them to think that, but there's always that possibility, right? And it's tantalizing. So I am very curious about this. And I'll link the article below so that you can look up this technology and see what you think. What I saw in the past were a lot of hypothesis studies, that kind of thing, just to see if the vagus nerve had some effect in progression in multiple sclerosis. See, I didn't really get the feeling there was as much study going the other way, that having multiple sclerosis might affect your vagus nerve in some terrible way. I don't know. So I went out to clinical trials. I thought, well, that might help me. So here you go. Here's what I found when I did the initial search on multiple sclerosis and vagus. So taking a look at what's available through clinicaltrials.gov, it's always a good step because you want to know if this has been researched in kind of a rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled, gold standard kind of way, as opposed to just, hey, we think this might be something interesting to look into. I guess I just have a bias that way. Anyway, I went out to clinicaltrials.gov and I searched on multiple sclerosis and vagus, because I'm assuming vagus nerve would be the thing I could have put in there, but I didn't want to limit it, so I just put vagus. And as I see here, as we scroll through here, there's not much. There's all of two different things. One says it's completed, the other is of unknown status, which means they filed that they were going to do the study and haven't been heard from since. So we won't even bother looking at that. But this completed one, it was done in Brussels. And let's go ahead. If we click on this, what does it tell us? It's the title of the study was The Gut Microbiome in Adult Multiple Sclerosis. Sounds pretty good. And as we see over here by the dates, the first posting was June 18th of 2021, and the last update posted was back in 2021 also. It was just a month later, July 23rd. So again, if it's completed and only lasted a month, that's a little strange. And as we go down here, we see no results posted. But just to see, what were they going to look at anyway? Had they looked at this, or had they actually produced results, we could have seen what they were looking for were these things. Number one, to map and benchmark the gut microbiome of patients with relapsing MS and primary progressive MS versus matched healthy controls. Sounds good. Determine whether relapsing or progressive MS have a unique bias for a gut microbiome classification recently characterized. Search for a relationship with inflammation, amino acid plasma levels, heart rate variability, vagus nerve tone, and hair cortisol as a biological marker of chronic stress. Number four, determine whether the gut microbiome is different in MS patients during a relapse. And number five, determine whether the gut microbiome remains stable after 3 months. All of that is really good information. I would think the results of this study would have proven useful whether they came out the way we were hoping or not. And so I guess I am a little disappointed that there don't seem to be any results along this line. So I went ahead, did a search. This time, instead of vagus, I used autonomic, because that gets at the autonomic nervous system, which the vagus system is part of, yes. But I'm interested to know if having multiple sclerosis has a documented effect on your autonomic nervous system. I looked at all the studies they had here, but this first one was the only one that I thought really was even close. It's being done in Italy, Benevento, Italy. It's called Definition of Autonomic Nervous System Involvement with Patients with Multiple Sclerosis. And I was curious enough about this one, especially since it's actually recruiting right now. I decided to go see what it's all about. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I just wanted you to see a few things here. According to this study description, the goal of this interventional non-pharmacological study, so no drugs are involved, is to evaluate the involvement of the autonomic nervous system in patients with relapsing, remitting, and primary progressive multiple sclerosis. Now, they make it clear pretty soon into the description that the eligibility for the study would be limited to people with those two kinds of MS. And they say people with other kinds aren't eligible. And as far as I know, secondary progressive would be the one that is not eligible. And of course, that would be the one that I would have. And I guess I'm not going to go to Italy anyway, but still, they could get some good results out of this. But I still get the feeling that we're looking at this kind of the other way round. But what are the goals? They say, is it possible to define the characteristics of dysautonomia to improve treatment on patients with multiple sclerosis through the management of conditions such as orthostatic hypotension or the thermoregulation disorders that inevitably condition the patient's life and response to rehabilitation? Another question would be, does the severity of the functional alterations correlate with impairment of small somatic and autonomic cutaneous nerve fibers in patients with multiple sclerosis? Another question is how much the involvement of the autonomic nervous system affects the clinical history and progression of the disease. And see, that one is probably the one that's the closest to what I'm interested in seeing. And then finally, do different clinical variants of multiple sclerosis manifest with different symptoms of involvement of the sensory autonomic nervous system? That also would be very interesting to know. And I think that the information that comes from the study might be very useful, but at this point it's rather hard to say. Yeah, okay, so that wasn't really all that definitive, was it? Well, okay, I'm not really sure. There is a little bit of attention being paid, but not as much as I'd like to see. And as I said, since I'm not a doctor, I don't know if the reason I'm not seeing anything is because there's nothing to see, or because no one's ever made the connection before, which I highly doubt. Come on, I don't have any claims on being insightful or brilliant in the medical field, but I might just check with my neurologist. I'll be seeing her fairly soon, and I might just check with her on that and see if she's got any ideas, because this is something that, okay, it doesn't keep me awake at night, but I'm curious about it. If it's something that affects not just me, but another person with MS, and it's one piece of our autonomous nervous system, why not other things? Why not our heart rate? Why not our ability to breathe? Why not? You saw in the video that the vagus nerve controls things like swallowing and the tongue. And I have friends who have difficulty with those because of their MS. Is that because of something that's going on in their brainstem, or is the MS affecting the vagus nerve? This is an important question, I think. So you can bet that I'm going to be looking into it. And in the meantime, let me know if this is something that's of interest to you, something that maybe you've talked to your doctor about, something that where you have a symptom that you're thinking, this might be related to MS, but I can't get anyone to really take it seriously. I am very, very interested to know. But that's all I have for you today. So until I see you again in my next video, your assignment is to keep your general health just as strong and solid as you possibly can. And we'll see each other again soon.